So a key area of the agency agreement is the agent's duties, and they should be as full as possible. There should be as full a recording as what you want the agent to do as possible. Now, the obvious purpose of recording the agent's duties in a written agreement is that it will be clear to both parties what's expected from the agent. But as a secondary purpose, recording a long list of duties in a written agreement will also make it easier for the principal to performance manage the agent. So if the agent's not coming up to scratch, not doing what you want him to do, then you can performance manage by using the actual specific written terms that have been agreed by the parties. And that performance management may be with a view to exiting the agent if things got so bad that you do want to get rid of the agent, or there will be with a view of actually genuinely improving the agent's performance by requiring the agent to comply with written terms that it's signed up to at the beginning of the agency agreement. So if you want to terminate an agency agreement, a well-drafted agreement can make the difference between having to pay an indemnity and compensation and not. The more duties that are imposed on the agent, and the better drafted they are, then the easier it is for the agent to trip up and to be exited without an entitlement to a payment. Now, Rachel will be talking next about termination, but I would say that a principal should have an eye at the very beginning, at the outset of a relationship with an agent, to how it's going to end and to protecting itself properly and putting itself in the best position for when the agency agreement does come to an end. The obligations on an agent under the agency agreement should be a mix of general obligations and specific ones. So an example of a general obligation is the obligation to use the agent's best efforts to promote and increase sales within the territory. That's something that you'll see in many written agency agreements. And then an example of a specific obligation might be a weekly or monthly reporting obligation, which says that you have to report on X, Y, and Z, and spells it out in the written agreement. One key duty or one key area that we would recommend including in any agency agreement with agent's duties is the obligation on an agent not to either act for a competitor or take on any other business interest which interferes with the agent's performance of his duties under the agency agreement. We find that the issue with agents being involved in either competing brands or developing their own brands and spending most of their time doing that to the detriment of the agency agreement is something that comes up over and over again and is probably the primary reason why principals want to get out of agency agreements. And whilst there are parts of the regulations of the common law which do address the issue of competitors and which you can use, it's always easier to have a set of express written obligations on an agent which lead to a right of termination with immediate effect, for example, than having to rely on the regulations of the common law. Moving on to another area which will be probably at the forefront of most fashion brands' minds when you're entering into an agency agreement is minimum sales requirements. Now, the regulations say nothing about targets, so therefore a decent agency agreement will probably include specific targets, actual figures set out for, say, the first 2 to 6 seasons often of the agency agreement. And then a mechanism for targets to be agreed after that period expires. So thought needs to be given as to whether the figures will be targets or minimums, something which the agent to aim for, something which the agent must achieve as a very minimum. It's most common for agents to be required to use best or reasonable efforts to achieve a target. It's obviously, for obvious reasons, difficult to get an agent to agree to a minimum figure. And then also worth considering is what's to happen if an agent fails to meet those targets for any particular season. And you might want to include a right to terminate the agency agreement with immediate effect because the agent hasn't reached the targets, or appoint another agent in the territory, or cut down the extent of the agent's territory. Now, these sorts of rights can be included in an agency agreement, but a word of warning, there's not really any case law in this area, and there's much debate about how whether a principal is able to terminate for a repudiatory breach, a material breach of an agreement, because the agent has not reached a target. Performance is a very difficult issue to accuse an agent for breach because of. So there's no guarantee that if you do include these sorts of provisions which allow certain consequences to flow if the agent doesn't reach his targets, that you'll be able to exercise those without exposure to an indemnity or compensation payment. Now the final area I'm going to look at for agency agreements is commission. Obviously, it's important to consider what sort of rights the agent should have in relation to commission. In terms of, if you say nothing, then the regulations 7 and 8 of the commercial agents regulations deal with this area. Regulation 7 deals with the agent's right to commission on sales made during the period of the agency agreement, and it provides that an agent is entitled to commission where a sale is made as a result of an action, where a sale is made with a customer that he's introduced to the principal, and for an exclusive agent on sales made to customers within his exclusive territory. Regulation 8, on the other hand, deals with an agent's right to commission on sales made after the agency agreement has come to an end. So it provides that an agent will be entitled to commission on sales which are made after the end of his agency agreement if the agent can show that the sale was concluded within a reasonable period of the termination of the agency agreement, and if the agent can show that that sale was mainly attributable to his efforts whilst he was an agent. Now, it's not enough for an agent in those circumstances to say, I was the agent at the time, had a relationship with this customer, so therefore the sale is mainly attributable to me. The agent does have to show a specific causal effect. So I had a meeting with so-and-so, the buyer from that customer on that day. We discussed them placing an order in this amount. I then had follow-up correspondence or discussions with him. The agent actually does need to be able to evidence a link between the two. Now, it is possible for a principal and the agent to read Regulations 7 and 8 won't apply to the agency agreement, and then express clauses will replace them. So we recommend, as minimum, that the right to commission on sales made after termination of the agency is excluded completely. This can be done, and obviously it's preferable for a principal only to have to pay commission on sales accepted before termination than have to consider sales made, say, in 3 months after termination and try and work out whether that sale was mainly attributable to the old agent or the new agent or sales rep. And that could be a sort of painful exercise. Obviously, you'll also have to consider commission rates, and you might want to agree different commission rates, say, for forward orders and stock orders. But just a word of warning, care needs to be taken when you're drafting the commission clauses of the agency agreement, because there's a number of provisions of the regulations which you can't vary to the detriment of the agent. So you just do need to make sure that you're within the sort of bounds of what the regulation says, can and cannot be agreed. Okay, so for the start of the agency relationship, fast forwarding right to the very end, I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to talk about terminating agency agreement.